land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the redwood.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Abdel's Human Rights Show, This Land is Your Land. Today's topic is a very depressing and saddening and heartbreaking one. We will be talking about the plight of women in Afghanistan and Lebanon. To give you a brief introduction about what's been happening in Afghanistan, it's been 10 years since the Taliban regime has gone down. I know it seems like a long time. I mean, we don't really think of it as 10 years since the Afghanistan war started. 10 years later, there's still barely any progress with regards to women's rights in Afghanistan. The crimes are still the same. And today's topic is specifically about moral crimes. Now, moral crimes is always put in quotes if you read it online because it's not actually a thing. There's no such thing as a moral crime, and it's not even in the Afghani constitution. So what happens is that these women, they are forced into marriages, something that's very popular in Afghanistan. They're forced into marriages at 17 and 18 or younger even, and they're just not happy. They're being abused physically, verbally, sexually by their in-laws, by their husbands, and they decide to run away. Right? You with me, Brandon?
Right.
So they end up running away. They go overseas, or no, they don't go overseas. They go out of their village. But then they get caught. They try to go to a government official or a policeman, and they say, hey, I've been abused. Help me out. What do I do? Where do I go? And instead of getting the actual predators, the actual people who are perpetrating these crimes, they take the victims. They take the woman. Yeah, it's like, hey, you've been raped. Well, you're accused of prostitution. They take them to prison. And they can spend up to 15 years in prison for running away from an abusive husband. How ridiculous is that? I mean,
are they forced into prostitution?
Yeah, all the time in Afghanistan. They force women are forced into prostitution. There's actually a documentary called "The Dancing Boys of Afghanistan." They sometimes force little boys into prostitution and dancing.
That's terrible.
It's disgusting.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. So this is the double burden of this problem. These women are abused, one. Now, two, they try to get help, but then they get arrested. I mean, where are they supposed to go? One girl said, she gave a fake name in the interview. She said, at first I was forced into a marriage at 19. If I didn't approve of him, I hate my husband. I hate the word husband. But if I had known that I'd be arrested for complaining, I would have just committed suicide.
Yeah.
I mean, these people are preferring suicide over life because of how ridiculous these laws are.
Now, who's controlling this? The Taliban?
Well, no, the Taliban are out of the picture now. It's just that the government, Karzai's government, doesn't do anything about this.
And we're losing men over there for this government?
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous to think that we call them allies now, that we've completely, quote-unquote, overdone their regime, but we are actually losing our boys overseas for this kind of ridiculousness. I mean, what has been achieved? I mean,
really ridiculous.
Well, the United States does not uphold the human rights doctrine it's supposed to.
Yeah.
And as people, we should urge the United States to actually do something about this.
I think we should get out of there.
I mean, first and foremost, 10 years later, after the Taliban, and this is happening. So a man, in a little background on Afghanistan, a man can divorce himself from a woman, but a woman can't actually they can't call for a divorce from a man. So it's an archaic law in Afghanistan that men can call for divorces, but not women.
Women have no rights, essentially.
Essentially, yes. They have little to no rights, although it has slightly improved from 10 years ago. Slightly. And proposed now is a bill called the Family Law in the Afghanistan Constitution, but it hasn't. No one has talked about it since 2010. That would actually allow for women to have easier a divorce procedure that would be easier for women. So this is our story today. 400 women and children have been tried and oh, by the way, these women and children can't actually read. The illiteracy rate in Afghanistan is so high. Actually, it's so high that when they vote, they're given pictures of the person that's running for office, and they just put an X on his face because they can't read.
Right.
So literacy in Afghanistan is ridiculously high. You with us,
Yeah.
Brent? So these women, they sign confessions, but they don't actually know how to read and write. They're just forced to sign confessions of prostitution, of whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And even when they are raped, they sign off that they were actually, prostitution, or that was their fault, or whatever.
Afghanistan sounds like no man's land.
Afghanistan
Yeah.
is no man's land,
Right.
and something has to be done about it.
Right.
I mean,
Why do the United States have to do? Why do we have to be alone in all of this?
what do you
It
mean?
just seems like we put our boys there, we put our resources there, and all the other countries are very minimally involved, if at all. Why does it always fall on us?
Well, I mean, I guess, this is a show to discuss the actual issue of human rights, but the United States is seen as the patriarch of the world,
Yeah.
especially given our,
Yeah.
since we have the largest military by a
Right.
factor of 27
Yeah,
from the
so
next largest one.
Let our boys be killed. Let our boys go out there.
Well, I
right?
mean, yeah,
You know,
that's the question.
Because
right.
why? I don't want to see another boy killed in Afghanistan.
I am with you on that. I think no one should have gone to war in the first place. I'm a pacifist myself. I don't believe that war is a necessary means to do anything. But yeah, you're right. I mean, that's a human rights violation itself. It's questionable whether we should have gone to war in the first place, or
Right.
whether the war was carried out morally.
Right.
Now, besides that, now that's the status of women in Afghanistan right now.
Right.
They,
Not much better than it was 10 years ago.
Not much, but by a little
little
bit it
bit,
is in
yeah.
the books at least. Now there's a campaign against the Karzai's government to actually do something about this. So just to sum up, these women are forced into prostitution,
Right.
forced into marriages at 17, 16, at a very young age, where we're just playing with our iPods and basketball and worrying
Yeah,
about
yeah,
boyfriends and
yeah,
girlfriends. These
yeah.
girls are forced to get married for life at
Right.
16. They don't
Yeah.
have a say in it. They hate their husbands. They're
Yeah.
effectively raped by their
Right.
husbands, and
They're
they
not
try.
allowed to go to school. There's
No.
no education.
No,
They can't
nothing.
read or write. No literacy.
No friends, nothing. Just
Yeah.
they live with their husband. They're just a sex tool, and they
Right.
try to run away. If they're caught, they're accused of something called a morality violation, a morality crime,
Right.
and they're locked up for 15 years on a confession that they did not sign because they can't read or write.
Right.
Now, any comments on that?
Well, I think that people in the United States really don't realize what's going on around the world, and
Right.
and the drastic things and the disgusting things and the ridiculousness of the stuff going around in the world, as you were talking about, Abdel. I have actually a question for you. I know Mr. P touched on it a little bit, but these women really have no rights at all. They are really just not even humans to them, basically. They're really just like, just people that you could throw away, people that, they don't really have
In
a heart.
Afghanistan, that's I believe that would be consensus. Yeah.
Right. And to me, that's disgusting. That's, it's absurd what's going around there. And I think that people really need to step up their game in terms of helping these people, and seeing what the most possible thing they could do to really help these people move on with their lives, and not having, being controlled by people who have no hearts at all.
Right.
So.
And as you said, Brendan, it is disgusting, and we can all sit here and say how bad it is, and I would certainly lead that discussion and tell you how bad this is. But I urge listeners and Mr. P and Brandon and myself to actually go out and do something. Write a letter to a politician, call a politician, sign a petition, attend a protest, do something.
Take action.
Take action somehow. Tell people about this. I'm sure very few people would actually have known about something as obscure as this.
Right, and you see people now like worrying about their breakups with their boyfriends, or worrying about how they didn't get $20 instead of $50 for an allowance. But there's bigger stuff going on around the world.
Right. So I urge people, and we're all selfish in that we enjoy a lifestyle here in the United States. The lower middle class in the United States enjoys a lifestyle that is far more lavish than about 98% of the world.
Yeah. Poverty in the United States is not
as
representative
bad
of poverty around the world.
Correct. We all of us, all of our listeners, you, me, Mr. P, Brandon, we all live far more lavishly than the rest of the world. And I think that's enough for us to recognize our responsibility, our obligations to other people, which we may not see directly, but other people who are affected, who cry, who commit suicide, who bleed for things they did not commit. I think we have a responsibility to these people. And that concludes the first topic. So let's go to a break now, Mr. P.
All right.
And when we come back, we'll talk about the plight of women in Lebanon.
You're listening to This Land is Your Land.
This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me.
As I was walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley.
This land was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me. I've roamed and rambled, I followed my footsteps to the sparkling sands of the diamond deserts, and all around me a voice was sounding. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land. From
And we're back with the Abdel's Human Rights Show, This Land is Your Land, with Brendan Barris and Mr. Placino. And in the previous session, we talked about the status of women in Afghanistan and how they effectively have very few to little divorce and marriage rights, and how they are accused of moral crimes when they're actually trying to report actual human rights violations. Okay, now for this segment, we'll talk about the status of women in Lebanon. And with us today is a very big issue that deals with domestic workers. Now, domestic worker, as you all know, is just just workers at home. Just in the Middle East, this is actually a big problem in Egypt and Syria and Lebanon. Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. In Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, this is actually a big problem in the Middle East. And what is the problem? So, these people, they're granted visas from overseas, from Ethiopia, from the Philippines, from all West Asian countries, very poor countries, and they come here to make some money, make a wage. So they're granted visas. They go to Lebanon and they work. Okay, so they do your typical stuff. They clean, they wash dishes, whatever. But then part of their contract is not to be abused. However, this is the problem. Almost all of the constitutions, all of the the laws in the Middle East, all of the worker laws, everything, do not address domestic workers as a subset of workers. They're not addressed at all. They almost don't exist. These people, they legally almost don't exist. So you have these domestic workers being abused. They're being beaten. They're being physically, verbally abused. They're forced to do more work than they thought they would. They're not given their wages, so effectively they're being slaves. Right. It's almost, and oh, by the way, the Lebanese government and the Ethiopian government are making it harder to get these people into Lebanon because of these violations. So now guess what they do? They traffic them in. So human trafficking as a result of stricter laws preventing the abuse of domestic workers. Now there's one specific worker, and her name is Desha Desisa. She's of Ethiopian descent, and she went to Lebanon to work. Now, what happened was she was mentally ill. Now, they have a mentally ill domestic worker, and she could not work anymore. She had a health problem, and she just could not do any more work. And you can see her getting beaten up right in front of the Ethiopian consulate by the guy who recruited her in the first place to bring her to Lebanon. And then instead of being treated or taken to a hospital or whatever, she was later taken to a hospital. She's beaten, forced into a car when she clearly can't even. She's barely resisting. I mean, she's trying, but she can't. She's taken to a hospital and she commits suicide at the hospital because of the abuse. She's not the first. She's not the last. Hundreds of domestic workers in the Middle East suffer from this abuse. So to recap, they're taken from their homeland. They come here expecting to make, or in the Middle East, expecting to make more money, better money, go back to their families. But instead, they're abused. They're forced into contracts that they were not expecting. They're physically, verbally abused, sometimes sexually. They're trafficked into the country and locked in there. They're locked into their workplace. Sometimes they're not even given. They're not given food. They're not given a sanitary place to live, sanitary water. So it's pretty much worker abuse. And to add to that, they're not even mentioned in those countries' respective worker laws. So they almost don't exist.
So to recap this, they're taken from
countries,
Ethiopia,
right.
Countries like that.
Countries like that.
Who takes them?
Now they travel.
They do that on their own?
There's recruiters in those countries.
Okay.
Almost like a slave trade, pretty much. There's
Right.
recruiters in those countries that know that people want more wages, whatever. That
Right.
also happens in the United States, by the way.
Yeah.
And these people, they go to the recruiters. They say, hey, whatever, I want to do a contract for 1 year. Go to Lebanon. They travel as usual. And as far as I understand, by the way, there could be some mistakes there. But they travel, and then they get to their country, and then the abuses happen.
Yeah.
The owners, I mean, this is
Essentially
effective
slave trade.
Essentially, but with a wage, and they can go back.
What kind of wage?
Well, it's probably a terrible wage. I mean, you're talking about Lebanon
basically, I mean,
just
plus the living,
it's wage slavery.
Yeah.
It's wage slavery. They're
Right.
beaten. They're yelled at. They're not fed. It's slavery.
Yeah. Call it what you will. It's a form of slavery.
It is.
Yeah.
And they're exploited. They're migrant workers. A lot of times, by the way, they're not even domestic workers. They don't work at home. They're sometimes just migrant workers. People who just travel to work in another country. Those are abused all the time, even here in the United States. Here in the United States, you have people of Mexican descent coming here, commonly called border hoppers by your local. Brendan has to get off the show, but they're called derogatory terms of all color and type, and they come here, they do all the work, they do a lot of the dirty work that no American would want to sign up for, and they're accused of taking our jobs. And if they try to complain about during their work, if there are any human rights violations or abuses, if they try to complain about on-site violations, they're just taken back to their country. Deportation just sends them out. I mean, they have effectively no right overseas. And now this happens with migrant workers all over.
All over the world.
All over. I mean,
it's not just it's not just the Mideast. It happens all over the world.
This happens in the United States. This
Yes.
happens in New Mexico. This happens in
Yes.
Arizona. This happens in ironically the states which tend to vote against the people that they're abusing. I mean,
well, look at all these vans they get confiscate, and there's like 40 people in a van, and what do you think happens with those people?
In some meatpacking companies, these people of Mexican descent primarily, they come here in their countries. They expect to make a better wage. There are commercials for them to come to the United States, come make money, and they cross the only way they can get here, because the legal process is so tedious, is to just cross the border, as they're commonly accused of.
Right.
And a minority of them are actually carrying drugs or dealing drugs, by the way. They're usually heads of families that want to make money, like genuinely just want to serve their families. And they come here, they work at a meatpacking company, they fit in, they live with 10 other people in a 2-meter square room, they sleep on top of each other, they eat scraps of the meat they work with all day, and in the end, if they're trying to complain or trying to run away, they just call the company owner calls deportation and they're kicked back into Mexico. Nothing happened.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
what's up with that?
It's it's slavery.
It's slavery. It is
and
slavery.
It's worldwide slavery.
Right.
And I, personally, I don't know what to do about it, other than put more border patrol, more cops on there. And
I mean, I don't know if that's the actual solution.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't really know, but I think the first step in all of this is to subscribe to some sort of magazine that discusses human rights violations around the world, because you should be mad about this.
Yeah.
You should be annoyed by this.
Yeah.
I mean, you should have that feeling in you that says this is not fair. If I could do something, I would do it. If I'll do what I can.
It starts with the people themselves, the countries themselves that allow this. I mean,
Right. And it
how do
starts
you-
with us, actually. No, it starts with us. We know nothing about this. Most people know nothing about this.
If they do know about it, they
Right.
don't know what to do
Right.
about it.
And most people, yeah, exactly. And for the most part, this concludes our show today because we're running short on time. But in the next episode, we'll try to discuss children's rights around the world, and we will discuss what's happening in Egypt right now, the unfinished revolution, and we will see you on the next episode. Thank you very much.
You've been listening to Abdel Morsi. This land is your land. Keep it locked every week to listen to another episode and series in this debate about human rights. So, have a good day.